Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I'm Morgan Boyle, Manager of Adult Cultural Programming at the New York Public Library, and I'm excited to welcome you all to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library and to this beautiful space overlooking Fifth Avenue. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome you to the World Poetry Salon with our partners at Limelight Poetry. Tonight's event features poet Colm Tóibín, musician Martin Hayes, and moderator Leonard Schwartz. We would also like to acknowledge the presence of the Consul General of Ireland in New York, Mr. Gerald Angley, and to thank the Irish government and its cultural director, Eugene Downs, for their support of this event. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a lovely night. Enjoy the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Good evening. Thank you, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here. I'm the poet Wang Yin and founder of Limelight Poetry. Sorry, I will keep my remarks brief so we can save as much time as possible for our two distinct guests. I have known Colm for 14 years. He is not only a successful novelist, but also an exceptional poet. I have read this book on Elizabeth Bishop, which offers insights more original than those of professional critics and has deeply inspired me. I have also watched his video when he speaks about poetry. He recites Sylvia Plath's Daddy with such ease and passion. Tonight may be the first time Colm read poetry in Manhattan, and we are lucky to listen it. When Colm told me he had invited Martin Hayes, I truly get goosebumps. Martin is a living musician legend, and having him here is truly incredible. For this, I want to thank Eugene Downs from Irish Department of Foreign Affairs and the Consul General of Ireland in New York, Gerald Angley, and my friend and tonight's host, Leonard. The brand and the highly professional NYPL team, and of course, our audience here and online. Without your support, this evening of poetry and music would not be possible. 感谢一直以来支持和关心我们的朋友们，没有你们的支持，没有你们的帮助不会有今天的晚会。Enjoy.
That's the opening of the song Boule Vogue, the ballad that was made so famous, with the new words put to it in 1898, which was the centenary of the rebellion of 1798, which took place in County Wexford, just in the town where I was born and brought up. Across from us was Vinegar Hill, which is mentioned in the song. Vinegar Hill was where the last battle was fought of the rebellion of 1798. So Vinegar Hill is an icon in the landscape. But of course, it's also an ordinary hill. It's where the town reservoir is, and this poem is called Vinegar Hill. And it's about being from the town where the icon is, but also where the ordinary hill is. Vinegar Hill. The town reservoir on the hill was built in the 40s. If you lifted a round metal covering and dropped a stone, you could hear it plonk into the depths. There were small hollows in the rocks that, no matter how dry the weather, were filled with rainwater. These rock pools must have been here with different water in them that summer when the rebels fled towards Needham's Gap. From the hill, as the Croppies did, you can view the town, narrow streets even narrower, and more trees and gardens than you imagined. It was burning then, of course, but now it is quiet. There is in the market square a monument to Father Murphy and the Croppy boy. We can see the hill from our house. It is solid rock in the mornings, as the sun appears from just behind it. It changes as the day does. My mother is taking art classes and thinking it natural to make the hill her focal point, is trying to paint it. What colour is Vinegar Hill? How does it rise above the town? It is humped as much as round. There is no point in invoking history. The hill is above all that, intractable, unknowable, serene. It is in shade, then in light, and often caught between. When the blue becomes grey and fades more, the green glistens, and then not so much. The rock also glints in the afternoon light that dwindles, making the glint disappear. Then there is the small matter of clouds that make tracks over the hill in a smoke of white, as though instructed by their superiors to break camp. They change their shape, crouch down, stay still, all camouflage, dreamy, lost, with no strategy to speak of, yet resigned to the inevitable. When the wind comes for them, they will retreat. Until this time, they are surrounded by sky and can as yet envisage no way out. The Blackstairs Mountains are a set of mountains in the southeast of Ireland on the border between County Wexford and County Carlow. The Morris Minor cautiously took the turns, and behind us the Morris 1000, driven by Auntie Kathleen, who never really learned to work a clutch. I remember getting out the bleakness, the sheer rise, as though the incline had been cut precisely and then polished clean, and also the whistle of the wind. As I grudgingly climbed Mount Leinster, all of us, in fact, trudged most of the way up, with Uncle Pat carrying a pair of binoculars borrowed from Peter Hayes, who owned a pub in Court Street. My uncle surveyed the scene as far as Carlow with the binoculars, and up towards the Wicklow Mountains. And my father, when he was handed them, claimed that he could actually see the sea. But when it was my turn, all I saw was something vague in the distance, that no amount of focusing could convince me were foam or waves. So much chatter and excitement, my mother wearing slacks and a headscarf, and Auntie Kathleen her sensible shoes, so much distraction that my uncle did not realize until we came back to the cars that he must have left the binocular case somewhere maybe when we stopped near Black Rock Mountain on the way down. The adults all looked worried. How could they face Peter Hayes or his wife and his sister, who helped him run the bar, with the news? Then my brother Brendan said that he would go back up and see if he could find the case. But Kathleen was even more against the plan than my mother. It would take an hour to get up and half an hour to get down, and that was if he ran all the way. But he looked for approval from my father and Uncle Pat. He would be quick, he said. And so he set out to bring back the case. Soon he was a speck, and then smaller, until not even the binoculars could find him. There was worry that a mist could descend, but it stayed bright, uncloudy. It was one of those long July Sundays. We waited. I don't know what we talked about or what we did. Time passed. I suppose all of us worried that he wouldn't find the case after all the trouble, that he would look everywhere, would eventually appear empty-handed. The adults always had something to discuss. My father and Pat could talk history or hurling or tell stories about old priests. My mother and Auntie Kathleen could ask the girls about school, the nuns, and I could watch them. I do that to this day. But none of us mattered against the one who had left us, who was still out of sight. When he returned, pale-faced, silent, with the case in his hand, he was greeted by Pat with a 10-shilling note. He had found the case where my uncle thought it had been left, on that wall at the lookout point a bit below Black Rock Mountain. As we drove south in our convoy of 2 small cars, no one thought of anything much more than the night ahead, the day to come. No one imagined another Sunday, years hence. He has been found dead, your brother. You should get a flight home as soon as you can. In the time the taxi snakes towards the airport, and the next day when I see him in his coffin, I think of that journey up the mountain, the single intent, and I imagine my brother searching once again for the leather case, not seeing it there on that wall, and then looking all around, defeated, knowing that his climb on this occasion has not worked out. And I want him to be assured by someone there is nothing to worry about. Things have changed. Most of those awaiting you are dead. Auntie Kathleen and Uncle Pat and Harriet and Maeve and our mother and father and Niall too. Even Peter Hayes, his wife and sister. No one will be disappointed. The binocular case can linger where it will. Even the binoculars themselves don't work. It is better to take your ease, lie down in the scarce grass, wait a while, close your eyes when night falls, dream of what can be seen through a convex lens, the Barrow, the Slaney, sharp lines in the landscape, a blur that might be Carlow Town and fields, folding out for miles, and then what must be the coast, the soft waves at Cush, the long strand at Curracloe. But really, just what I saw that day through those binoculars, something vague in the distance, a dimness receding, first shimmering, then still. This poem is a true story. In the White House. Some guests pushed others. This is St. Patrick's Day, 2010. It's a time, some people might remember, there was a president called Obama. In the White House, some guests pushed other guests so they could get a better view of the Obamas and Joe Biden. At one moment, a group decided to move right up to the front, getting their colleagues to behave like security guards, creating a safe corridor. The place was packed with Irish Americans in suits. I saw Gabriel Byrne. Obama and Biden had a boyish way of telling each other jokes while Michelle Obama stood apart, unamused. The White House decor was fussy with too many different textures in the wallpaper, carpets, and coverings. And the paintings were bad. At one moment, Obama was close to us, but then someone got in the way. He was about to depart when luckily Joe Hassett politely called him back and brought me and Gary Hines towards him. Obama's hand was soft when I briefly shook it. We were ushered then into a large, long room. And this is the part that remains most memorable. They left us to enjoy our drinks for a while, and then they decided it was time for us all to go. But they made no announcement. Instead, the staff stood in line at the back of the room and moved one step at a time towards us, letting no one get behind them. They did this nonchalantly, casually. It was gradual, but it was also firm. We were so high on our brush with fame, however, we hardly noticed, until when they were a third of the way towards the exit and we realized they meant business, we would have to go. Was this a trick of Nixon's? Was it conjured up by Barbara Bush? Was it a Jackie special? Was it put in place by the Clintons? Or was it an Obama original? Anyway, it was clear that the Cade Mila Fulcher and the dear little Shamrock meant less than nothing now. And once the staff had hit halfway, it would not be long before we were all outside the door. Inside, with us gone, Obama would make decisions. Outside, we, the disenchanted Irish, hailed taxis unavailing. We'd expected to learn something in that house about power and politics. Instead, we witnessed what it is like to wear your welcome out. It does seem tempting, even still, to imagine the line of waiters as a metaphor for something, for soft power, soft coercion, for how to take a firm stance on foreigners, or for time's purposeful, discreet intent, how it moves just inches forward without us noticing, just as we are being distracted by wondrous sights and thoughts and idle talk. He pushes us firmly into timeless night and will not let us back. But that is stretching it. Instead, the thing itself, the fact, remains vivid in my mind. It was surprising and exact. It left us all speechless, unsure if we would ever have the courage to tell our friends at home in any detail of the ingenious and effective scheme used to get us out of the White House on St. Patrick's Day 2010.
Well, when Colm and I get together, I try to pick tunes that have some relationship to the poems, and it's kind of like so. But oddly enough, this was the easiest one because I actually have a tune called the Obama Reel, and it was composed by a friend of mine, Pedro Rida, because when Barack Obama was seeking election, even before he became president, he had gathered a lot of attention in Ireland at the time, and people were very drawn to him. And Pedro had some kind of fantastical idea about Obama being a great dancer. And so he wrote a tune that's kind of, well, it's a bit, maybe you could see him dance to it. I don't know. But I got to play it for him the following year. Because
You were in 2011.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. They ushered us in a row, and we just moved into the White House just following it. There we go anyway.
This poem is called Out of Touch. I thought it would be good, since my father had come back from the dead after all the years, to take him to places he had known or studied in. We began in Dublin, walking along Molesworth Street, heading towards the National Library. It was so strange about your mother, he said. No matter what book I found for her, she wanted something else, with more, what's the word? Until I could find nothing that she liked. And then he turned, suddenly curious. Is she dead, Colm? Is that what happened? Yes, more than 20 years ago, I told him. Of course, he replied. We've been out of touch. I didn't even know that she was sick. This poem is called Sean's Bed. I don't know if it's just me or if it's ever happened to anybody else where you're staying in another house and someone says you can have so-and-so's bed. And you think that's great until you're in the bed and you think, I wish so-and-so was also in the bed. You know, it's just a fleeting thought, it's a lyric thought. I don't want to dwell on it. And then you find yourself alone in this bed with the odd, shadowy presence of the other person whose bed it actually is. And, you know, you do your best and, you're on your own with it. But anyway, this poem is called Sean's Bed. This used to be Sean's bed. When I turn, I almost touch his shadow flesh and feel his warm shadow breath. In the shower, when I reach for the soap, a dream hand joins mine to make the lather. Dry, I step into one leg of his trousers. Our shoes are the same size. He leaves wearing them.
follow that.
Thank you. I was worrying about that sight line. So thank you so much. My name is Leonard Schwartz. I've the pleasure and honor of interviewing or talking with Colm Tóibín about the poems and about the collaboration. Please, let's give another round of applause for the performance. So, Colm, you're celebrated as a novelist, and it's only in recent or relatively recent years that you're also celebrated as a poet. Could you talk a little bit about that process of emerging as a poet? And also, we spoke a little on the phone last week. You had some interesting comments about just compositionally, materialistically, how you write with a hand for the one medium and the laptop for the other. So maybe just to take us into the compositional process, as well as the question of emerging as a poet.
Yeah, I think as a lot of people here will know, in Ireland, being a bad poet would be really taken very seriously as a moral or ethical issue, and you would be despised. And this is the reason being is that there are, we could name easily, 20 really good poets and some wonderful poems of the last century. And people have dedicated their lives to this. And so I wrote poems between the ages of 12 and 20. And I wrote them seriously, and I sent them out, and I had it all planned. And the problem was simple, that they were really no good, and that I was trying to write poetry. I was trying to be a poet, and the poem wasn't there. I was very encouraged by this recently by reading, there's a big book, a 1,200-page book coming out soon of Seamus Heaney's collected poems, and they put in some juvenilia. And I looked at some of the juvenilia with some glee, because Gerard Manley Hopkins was always the problem. You were trying to write those clotted lines, filled with language. And Heaney was trying to do this too, but he went on to be Seamus Heaney. I went on to be nobody. And the advantage of going to university at 17 was there were a lot of people in University College Dublin who were not just writing poems and publishing them, but were also really critical of everyone else. And so I got shoved out, and really nobody liked anything I was doing, and they were right. And at 20, I stopped, and the world had 30 years from me of pure silence. And sometimes in Dublin, I would be the only non-poet at the poetry reading. The poetry reading was filled with poets, and I would be sitting there too. And I read everything that came out. And I wrote the book on Elizabeth Bishop, and I took a huge interest in the thing, but it was over. I was that strange thing of failed poet. It was like in the previous generations, we had failed priests, fellows who'd gone to the seminary for 6 years and just couldn't do the last bit. And they're always, instead of huge freedom and just drinking themselves, going around the place, welcome everywhere they went, there would be these strange, beaten down creatures whose mother was horribly disappointed. And being a failed poet had some of the same things attached. There was a lot of dandruff involved. And so it just stopped, and it just dried up. And the problem then became, I wrote a novel which was very long and needed a lot of work. And so for about 3 or 4 years, I was really tied up. I was every day involved with phrases and sentences. And then it was over and gone, the novel. And then in the evenings, strange little phrases would arrive in my head. And I started to write them down, and I discovered a new system whereby, I write my novels in longhand, but if you did this on a laptop and you did it fast, and everything that came into you did fast, and then you would just cut it, erase it, and you wouldn't keep a copy of it. So that there was only one poem always on the screen, and the antecedents, lost phrases were just gone. And there's an ad on Irish television, about stuff in a hardware shop. If it's gone, it's gone. If you don't get it now. And so I would keep working like that. With a poem, I would go back all day to it, cutting out phrases, adding little things, seeing what could happen next. And, with that Obama poem, for example, I would have written the stuff about the metaphor and being a metaphor for time passing. And then I'd look at it and say, either that goes, that stuff, that, greasy stuff about, oh, it's a metaphor for how time comes and takes us all. No, it's not. And then think, will I cut it or will I just say, that's stretching it? Try just putting in that stretching it and see where that will take you. Therefore, it became a sort of action, a sort of excitement. And eventually I had some poems, but I did a good thing. I kept them to myself. And then eventually I showed them to someone, and he said, if you write more, we will publish a book. And it's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, I think, in my life. I wish someone said to me, but I was 13. And so he was John McAuliffe at Carcanet, and so I thought, well, if I'm going to write more, I better go really slowly because, if I get this wrong, it'll be so bad. And then luckily, a wonderful thing happened. The pandemic came, and it meant you had nothing else to do all day. And I was in California, meaning I was thinking a lot about home, about Ireland, about Wexford, and little things would come to me. The time my mother dressed up as a nun and came to the door as though she was a nun. And I would write a poem about any thought at all that occurred to me. And I worked very hard, which means a lot of poems didn't work. I knew they didn't work, or John McAuliffe would just say, this is not working. And that was lovely, just scrapped it. Just, if it's not working, out with it. And so that's my sad story about how I eventually joined the ranks. And there was one fellow poet who, there's a wonderful poem by Elizabeth Bishop called In the Waiting Room. And it's about a little girl in the waiting room. Her aunt is in, the dentist, and she's sitting outside looking at National Geographic. And it suddenly occurs to her, she's, I think, 7 years old, that she's a person, that she's an actual individual. And her aunt is different from her, and everybody else too. And then she says, I realized that I was an Elizabeth, meaning her name was Elizabeth, and she was an Elizabeth. A guy wrote to me and said, you are now an Elizabeth. I thought that was the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me, as well as the other guy saying he'd published my book.
Too nice.
I am an Elizabeth.
Thank you, Colm. Limelight Poetry Series director and poet Wang Yin has a poem called A Summer Day in the Company of Ghosts. It's actually the title of his book, A Summer Day in the Company of Ghosts. And the first line of your novel, The Master, is, sometimes at night he dreamt about the dead. I wondered if you could take us into the particular space between the living and the dead that you're clearly exploring in these poems.
Yeah, I mean, the last event that we did, which was in the home place in Seamus Heaney's village in County Derry in Ireland, it was a poem about the underworld. It was the whole idea of Orpheus and the whole idea of the Orphic dream, which is that actually for the duration of the poem, you can visit the dead or bring back the dead or invoke the dead or do something almost supernatural. Don't stretch it. Don't push that now. But and then every so often Martin would riff on or play, in relation to that. And so we had it was November, sort of ghostly Halloween sort of time, invoking that. And I suppose, it was the last thing I wanted to do was to write elegies. But then the idea with that memory of the binoculars, the binocular case, and the Blackstairs Mountain, that trip, and just writing that down, then realized, oh no, I know what I'm doing. I'm writing an elegy. I didn't know I was doing that. I thought I was just writing stuff down about that memory of that day, and then realizing that, getting the other stuff. So, it's one of the things that I don't think a novel can do as much. It's quite hard in a novel to say, last night I saw as Milton does, I saw my sainted wife. It's not as easy to do in a novel unless you're writing ghost stories, which I don't do. And so therefore, it's something I think poetry can particularly invoke.
Yeah, no, that's what's striking. It's a poetry that's involved with making the absent presence, but it's not ghost stories, right? It's presence,
yeah,
but not appearance, not apparition. It's
you're not
a
trying
mental
to frighten
image.
people.
You're not trying. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, really striking. Really striking. Can you say a little bit about the collaboration with Hayes? You've known one of the for forever, I think.
Just that I think it's Martin, it could be more than 35 years ago. I know we're all getting older. But it was one day during the Galway Arts Festival in the town of Galway in the west of Ireland, where I got stopped on the street by someone who was working for the festival. And it was Maureen Hughes, who you probably already know. And Maureen said to me, whatever you do, don't miss the lunchtime event at Druid Theatre tomorrow. I said, okay. So I got tickets for the lunchtime event at Druid Theatre tomorrow, and it was these two, I would have felt elderly, but now I suppose they were middle-aged men who were suits and ties, and they were playing, and they seemed to know each other. They were from County Clare, and I mean, it was utterly beautiful. And then it was half-time, and then it was the interval, and Martin, the young Martin Hayes, came onto the stage, because one of the men playing was his father. And he played with these two, I suppose this is a tradition, and he was working with it. Someone told me there was someone else with him. Was Dennis with you? But I don't remember Dennis. Dennis Cahill or Dennis Cahill, who played the guitar, came on with Martin, but I have no memory of this. Martin, I don't remember that at all. I remember the two guys. Was one of them, one was your father and the other was?
The other guy was Francie Donlan. They were kind of buddies playing music since they were in a band together since the 1946.
Was it the Tulla band?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and and Dennis played guitar with them that day, and it was the first gig he ever did in Ireland. This is Dennis and I were starting to play as a
What
duet
year was
at
that?
the time. 94 or 5 or 6, somewhere around there. Anyway, in that general area. But anyway, yeah. So Dennis was playing with them, and the two guys never played a concert in their life before. So the reason I turned up was I had helped them design the set list. They normally played for dancers, and that sorted everything out. But neither of them spoke between the pieces of music, and they didn't play the tunes very long. So I'm going, they're running out of a set list. And so I turned up just to throw some more tunes at them and kind of keep it going, So that's why I turned up.
And then you played with them. And I mean, first of all, it was the long hair, which you had then. But secondly, it was the way in which you and your father seemed to bond or seemed to, take care of each other as you were playing.
Yeah,
and there was something miraculous about that.
Yeah, it was in that, we could play together. We didn't have to think. We didn't have to try to understand each other. We didn't have to try to understand each other's music. It was just all kind of knitted together, kind of automatically somehow.
And did your brother, was he also a player?
My father's sister was married to another fiddle player, Paddy Canny. Yeah. There were lots of fiddlers around.
Did you play with him too?
I did, yeah. I did, yeah.
Martin, can you say a little bit about collaborating with Colm? What's from your point of view?
Well, I just try to pick up on the mood and the feeling of whatever it is Colm is talking about, and sometimes it's quite literal. I might just take a word from the piece he's doing, like Obama or something.
That last piece you played is called?
The last piece, The Boy in the Gap.
The Boy in the Gap.
Yeah, okay. And it's kind of just responding to the feeling of things, just how the words you say, how they impact me feeling wise. And I just not saying that I could exactly replicate that in music, but I can at least not contradict it and maybe flow from it in some way, So that's where it starts, and that's and where we enjoy it. So there you go.
One last question, and then and then we can hear more poems and more music. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, I'm going to use the term psychogeography. Your poems have to do with landscape, and if I may, just to repeat or read a passage in Vinegar Hill, which you read earlier. What color is Vinegar Hill? How does it rise above the town? It is humped as much as round. There is no point in invoking history. The hill is above all that, intractable, unknowable, serene. It is in shade and in light and often caught between, When the blue becomes gray and fades more, the green glistens and then not so much. The rock also glints in the afternoon light. That dwindles, making the glint disappear. So there's an intense attention to detail and to landscape here. There's also a suggestion that somehow it rises above its own description, but then there's statement that no, nothing ever transcends its own description. And of course, there's an event that is connected to Vinegar Hill, which is a massive defeat for Irish liberty, right? That battle, that war. So there is a lot of history, even as you say, there is no point in invoking history. So I wonder if you could say a little bit about the relationship between place, language, and something that resembles history.
Yeah. My father was a teacher, which meant that we had a bit longer holidays, and you could rent a hut very cheaply on the Wexford coast at that time. So we spent a lot of holidays on that coast, which is the east coast of Ireland, which is a much gentler coast, with the waves tend to curl. There are no rocks, there are pebbles, it's a very different world than County Clare, where Martin comes from, and so just that was the place, no matter where I went, that I thought about. That I would want to go back there and look at it again. And I kept setting things in some of the novels there. There was a moment recently where I was going for a long walk with someone along that strand in County Wexford, and we came to a bit where there's a little stream, and there's seabirds, in the stream or at the stream. But as soon as you come, you can see some of them fly off, and then all of them fly off. And someone said to me, "But that's a scene from." I think it's from Long Island, actually, and it's from the novel. And I said, yeah, that's where they go to that. And the person didn't realize that it was absolutely real. In other words, that every single bit of that strand, as I've described it over and over in novel after novel, is exactly down to where the where the stream is, where the cliffs get higher, where the seal in the sea sometimes is or not, depending on the day, and that's not nothing. It's not as though I've just made up this landscape or I picked a landscape out of nowhere. This, for some reason, represents everything. And I can go back to it again without worrying. The worry sometimes you go back, oh, here goes again, some more cliffs, more marl, more. Don't worry. Just write it as though you haven't done it before, because whatever is happening, you come back to it and you need to stay with it. And I'm working in longhand. It's not the typing action thing. It's a slow longhand. And I think all of us probably have that landscape, a place where you've been or where you spent time that you would think about or like to go back to and see, whose contours you probably know well, would like to know better. So it's that sort of idea. It's actually quite a simple idea. You could call it a landscape of the soul or a psychogeography, but it's maybe a place I know well and go back to, and comes up again and again in that as you're about to write another paragraph, oh my God, look where they're going now. Mm-hmm. They're going back to County Wexford. They're going back along that loan. They're turning. The French translator just goes and says, the number of times I've translated, they turned left at the ball alley. Because you're like, is there any chance? Like she says, you can almost put it in, they turn, that's what they do. They go down that road and they turn left at the ball alley, meaning a handball alley where they played handball. And you can go down that road, and if you do, please turn left at the ball alley.
Martin, anything you'd say about place and music, landscape and music?
Very, very similar experience. I keep coming back to the landscape, around my own locality, and small narrow roads and little vistas that overlook some valleys, and then some little quiet roadways that seem more musical to me than others, or that seem to have more richness, or in a weird way there's such a thing as places that seem older than other places, of course, which of course logically cannot be, but still there's something older in the feeling of those places. And there are places that I would consider little enchanted locations that you feel something different when you're there. And so my mind keeps coming back to those little small bohereens where you could find that enchantment,
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you. I think it would be nice to hear some more poems and some more music, don't you think? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to read just one more short poem. And it's the one thing you shouldn't do. I mean, if there are any Irish poets in the audience or anyone who wants to be one of our children or teaching anyone, there's one poem you should never write, which is the Pangur poem. Pangur was a cat, and he was owned by a monk, and it was the 8th century. And this is the famous Irish poem in Irish where the monk describes his hunt for words as he's writing his manuscript, and the cat is hunting for mice. So they're both really hunting. And so everyone, I mean, you could list the poets, Ivan Bolan, Paul Muldoon, Seamus Heaney. Everyone has translated this poem. It's been translated, and everyone has translated it brilliantly. It is open to translation. And there I was sitting one evening and thought, I'll have a go at Pangur. Pangur. Pangur, a neighbour's cat, comes to my flat for peace and quiet. He likes to lick my bare toes while I type, but he cannot keep himself in check, and soon he starts to bite. Pangur, I bark. If you don't stop, I will put you back in the poem written by that monk. Thank you.
So, thank you, Colm. So we don't have a lot of tunes like a feline nature. We don't have cat tunes, particularly, except for one called "The Cat in the Corner." So we'll, instead of putting him in the book now, we'll just put him back in the corner. And it's an old Irish jig, well-known tune called "The Cat in the Corner." Here we go.
so much for being here, and I think the New York Public Library would like to invite everyone to the lobby for refreshments and conversation. Certainly conversation. I think refreshments. I'm not sure. Thanks for being here this evening.